Now, as we've been reporting, many Rohingya Muslims have fled to Bangladesh since the start of Burma's latest army crackdown in Rakhine State. 370,000 people, according to the UN. The persecuted minority is also present in India, and that's what today's Focus report is on. The predominantly Hindu country is home to about 40,000 Rohingya Muslims, but the Hindu nationalist government believes they are a potential security threat and is looking to deport them all. Mandakini Garlot reports.
For members of the Rohingya Shining Stars, football is a welcome distraction from their difficult past. All of them fled Burma a few years ago in the face of rising violence, hoping that India will offer a fresh start.
When we first arrived here in India, we decided to gather football enthusiasts within our community, and we formed this club. But now that in the news we keep hearing that we might be kicked out of the country, well, playing football is helping us release the tension and not to think too much about it.
Their worries have multiplied following a controversial statement by India's Interior Ministry.
They are illegal immigrants in India. Deportation has to be through a legal process.
After the football match, Ataullah returns home to this refugee camp in New Delhi. The 50 Rohingya families that live here have no access to running water or a toilet. Thanks to a local NGO that has loaned them the land they live on, they get by with the bare minimum. Like Ataullah, those who live here still have relatives in Burma. But lately, they have been unable to contact them. Ataullah recalls that he was playing football when the Burmese army opened fire on his village in 2014.
The Burmese military entered our village and immediately opened fire, shooting civilians. There was a lot of confusion. People ran away, trying to flee. Once the village was empty, the soldiers burnt down the marketplace and then the houses. In the end, they destroyed the entire village. When Indian Prime Minister Modi traveled to Burma and met Aung San Suu Kyi, we thought he would have tried to explain her our problems. But nothing happened, and she is still calling us terrorists.
Instead, in a meeting with Aung San Suu Kyi, Indian Prime Minister Modi refused to condemn the violence against Rohingyas and affirmed India's support to Burma to fight the terrorist threat. India's controversial position on the Rohingya crisis and threats of deportation have led to protests in New Delhi. For Ataullah, a return to Burma is unthinkable.
If they send us back over there, we will be killed. So we prefer they don't deport us, and they kill us right here, right now.
Aung San Suu Kyi is a killer!
Their plea for help has been heard by one of India's most prominent lawyers, who's currently fighting a case against their deportation in the country's highest court. Prashant Bhushan believes that deportation is illegal under international law.
The principle of non-refoulement requires that such people who are refugees from a country where they are facing severe threat of life and liberty cannot be repatriated or sent back to that country. It's really quite remarkable that the same minister who has been saying that these Rohingyas will be deported back has been saying that India will welcome all non-Muslim refugees.
Regardless of the outcome of that case, the Rohingya are often unwelcome in the communities they live in. For instance, in this camp near New Delhi, 8 people were violently attacked by a group of Hindu extremists when they were preparing to celebrate Eid.
We had just bought 2 buffaloes for Eid. They were tied outside, right over there. but a group of Hindus came over asking us not to sacrifice the animals. Soon they were beating us with clubs and stabbing us with their knives.
Of the 40,000 Rohingya asylum seekers settled in India, over 16,000 have been recognized as refugees by the United Nations. All of them fear that they could be deported at any moment.
For more on this, I'm now joined in the studio by Amira Kamdar. She's written books about India and is a member of the editorial board of the New York Times. Hello, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you
For coming in. Could you start off by telling us a little bit more about how the Rohingya Muslims are treated in India?
Well, in India, you saw a little bit in the clip that we just saw about how they can be vilified by local Hindu communities. But that's true of all Muslims in India at this point. There's been mounting attacks on Muslims in India since the election of Prime Minister Narendra Modi in 2014. Mob attacks, vigilante justice, especially against anybody suspected of eating beef, and Muslims are just automatically assumed to be in that category. So the Rohingya find themselves in a country where anti-Muslim sentiment has grown markedly in the last few months, and they're swept up in this.
Apart from obviously being rattled, as we saw in the report, they're very worried about what's going to happen to them. Have we seen any immediate effects yet of this talk of deportation?
Well, I mean, I think my point of view, and this is my personal point of view, not necessarily that of the New York Times, is that this is really a political kind of announcement that they're going to deport the Rohingya. The Rohingya are stateless persons. They're not recognized as citizens by Myanmar. So I don't know how Myanmar would accept them back. And the minister has said, no, we'll do this formally, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's more a message to the government's right-wing Hindu base that this government will not stand for an infiltration of more Muslims, and this equation of all Muslims are terrorists, saying that they have to be deported because of a terrorist threat, when these are really refugees who fled for their lives, is coherent with the equation that they've made about Indian Muslims, that all Muslims are terrorists. I mean, Muslim equals terrorist is a message.
Where does that come from?
Well, I mean, it's not a message that's unique to India in the world right now, but certainly the demonization of the Muslim minority has been on the rise in India in the last couple of years.
Now, what chances there's a case being mounted against the effort of the government to deport Rohingya Muslims? What chance does it have, especially considering that India hasn't signed the UN Refugee Convention?
Well, as Prashant Bhushan, the lawyer we just heard from, has made the case in his argument to the Supreme Court, it's not just international law with regards to the principle of non-refoulement, where India has an obligation, but India's own constitution has articles protecting life, for example, life of all people in Indian territory, not just citizens, which this deportation order would also appear to violate. So on that ground as well. I personally would not be surprised at all if the Supreme Court rules against the deportation. It has shown itself to be independent of the government quite recently with a ruling on privacy, for example, on the right to privacy, which was a spectacular ruling. And this would actually be a solution for the government, which is coming under more and more pressure because of the scale of this refugee crisis. Bangladesh has let India know that it's not happy with India wanting to deport the 40,000 India has, when Bangladesh has just taken in 370,000 in the last few weeks. And Bangladesh is an important ally of India in the fight against terror. It's very interesting because yesterday, although, as your report pointed out, when Mr. Modi met Aung San Suu Kyi in Myanmar, he really backed up the Burmese government's line on the Rohingya. But yeah, I believe it was yesterday, quite recently, a new statement was issued on the situation by his government that for the first time referred to Rohingya refugees, and I think that's a sign of a bit of a softening.
Why do you think we're seeing a softening then? Because like you said last week, he said that he shared Aung San Suu Kyi's concern with extremist violence, and now this concern then for refugees.
Because of pressure from Bangladesh. Bangladesh is a very important ally of India's, especially in the fight against Islamist terrorism. And he also recently went to Bangladesh just prior to his visit to Myanmar, not too long back. He was in Bangladesh. They are important, that's a very important relationship for India. So Bangladesh has put a bit of pressure on India on this question.
So you were saying it's a political move. Do you think perhaps then that the government even anticipated that its efforts to deport Rohingyas would fail, and it's really just then about appealing to certain supporters?
I think that's the primary thing. I don't think they anticipated that the timing of the deportation announcement would coincide with this brutal sweep by Myanmar's military in Rakhine State. That has kind of put a focus on the deportation order that I don't think they were anticipating.
All right, we've run out of time. Thank you very much indeed, Mira Kamdar, for
Thank
coming
you.
in for today's Focus. Thank you for watching. We'll go to a break and I'll be back at the top of the hour. Stay tuned.